Imagine being banned from using your own tractor, then watching the very people who enforce that ban come crawling to your door when disaster strikes. That's exactly what happened to me when my HOA's ridiculous rule took effect. I jolted awake to the deafening silence, a silence that should have been filled with the steady hum of my farm's irrigation system, the familiar soundtrack of my mornings. Instead, something was terribly off. I swung my legs out of bed and shuffled to the window, expecting to see a minor glitch or an early malfunction. What I saw, however, was far more unsettling. My beloved tractor, the heart and soul of my farm, was nowhere to be seen. In its place, a sign had been mounted on my barn door in bold letters, reading, "Tractor use prohibited, violation of community standards." My heart sank. I'd spent years acquiring and maintaining that tractor. It wasn't just a machine. It was my lifeline, a trusted partner in every harvest and every challenging season. The news had spread like wildfire. Overnight, my once idyllic farm had become the battleground for a conflict I never imagined. The HOA, determined to enforce their sterile idea of perfection, had banned me from using equipment they deemed unsightly or disruptive to the neighborhood's image. I've been fined repeatedly for every minor infraction, from the color of my barn doors to the way my fields were plowed. But this was the final straw. My right to work on my own land was being violated, and there was nothing I could do about it until nature intervened. As the day wore on, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. A winter storm was brewing, one that promised heavy snow and biting winds. I tried to protest the ban with letters and phone calls, but the HOA remained stubborn, blinded by their obsession with uniformity. Then, as the first snowflakes began to fall, the unimaginable happened. The storm hit. Within hours, the once familiar landscape of my farm transformed into a white, treacherous wilderness. Roads became impassable. Power lines sagged under the weight of snow. And, to my astonishment, even the neighbors who'd once supported Karen's petty rules were now struggling to get by. That night, amid the howling wind and swirling snow, there was a frantic knock on my door. I opened it to find my neighbors, those same faces who had eagerly enforced my ban, shivering and desperate, pleading for help. Their cars were stuck, their driveways buried under drifts, and their calls for assistance echoed the irony of their new reality. In that moment, the true cost of the HOA's narrow-minded rules became painfully clear. And as I prepared to fire up my tractor once more to help clear the snow, I couldn't help but smile at the bitter irony. The very ban that had once cost me my livelihood was now forcing everyone to reckon with the limits of conformity. My farm, Green Valley Acres, had been in my family for generations, a sprawling 300-acre patch of land nestled on the outskirts of a tightly regulated suburban community known as Silver Crest Estates. While most of the neighborhood was characterized by perfectly trimmed lawns, identical white picket fences, and homes that looked like they were pulled straight from a catalog, my farm was a world of its own. It was a place where nature ran free, where the soil was rich with history, and where modern agricultural techniques blended with time-honored traditions. At the heart of my operations was an old, reliable tractor, a rugged machine that had seen me through countless planting seasons, harvests, and the occasional bout of bad weather. Silver Crest Estates, on the other hand, was a picture of suburban uniformity. Governed by a strict homeowners association, HOA, the community was known for its obsessive attention to detail. Every inch of property had to adhere to a set of guidelines, and any deviation, no matter how minor, was met with fines and relentless scrutiny. At the center of this regime was Karen Thompson, the notorious HOA Karen. In her early 50s and always immaculately dressed, Karen took it upon herself to patrol the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, enforcing rules with a zeal that bordered on fanaticism. To her, any display of individuality was a threat to the carefully curated image of Silver Crest Estates. I had always been an outsider in that world. While I respected the need for order, I believed that creativity and self-reliance were the true measures of character. My tractor, a symbol of my hard work and independence, was the engine that drove my family's legacy. It was more than just a machine. It was a testament to the values of perseverance and ingenuity that had been passed down to me. Over the years, I'd invested not only in the upkeep of the farm, but also in innovative methods to improve yield and efficiency, blending the old with the new. The conflict between my way of life and the HOA's rigid standards had been simmering for some time. Karen's endless fines for minor infractions, ranging from the natural, uneven lines of my plowed fields to the rustic charm of my weathered barn, had always irked me. But I had learned to let it roll off my back, convinced that my farm's purpose was bigger than any petty rule. That is, until she went too far and banned me from using my tractor altogether. The ban wasn't issued in a private letter. It was posted for all to see, a public proclamation of the HOA's disdain for what they considered unsightly machinery. News of the ban spread quickly throughout Silver Crest Estates. Some neighbors sympathized, secretly admiring my defiance. Others, however, supported Karen's insistence on conformity, believing that even my tractor should fit into the polished image of the community. The debate was fierce and divided the neighborhood. Yet, amidst the turmoil, one fact remained indisputable. Without my tractor, my livelihood was at risk, and my ability to care for my land was severely compromised. Then the storm came. It wasn't just any snowstorm. It was a blizzard, a ferocious winter assault that transformed Silver Crest Estates and Green Valley Acres alike. As the snow piled high and the winds howled, even the most ardent supporters of the HOA found themselves powerless, their pristine driveways and meticulously maintained gardens buried under drifts. In the midst of this chaos, my neighbors, once so eager to enforce Karen's rules, began to realize that nature had its own agenda. The stage was set for a dramatic reversal. In a community where conformity had once reigned supreme, the unexpected fury of a winter storm was about to level the playing field. And I, with my resolve hardening like the frozen ground beneath my feet, was determined to reclaim my right to work my land and prove once and for all that individual freedom cannot be dictated by arbitrary rules. The ban on my tractor came as a shock, but it was only the beginning. Karen Thompson's latest edict, posted in bold red letters on my barn door, declared that my tractor was incompatible with the aesthetic standards of Silver Crest Estates. I received a formal notice shortly after, accompanied by a hefty fine that totaled $50,000, a sum designed to break even the most resilient spirit. To the HOA, my tractor was an eyesore. To me, it was an essential tool, a lifeline for maintaining my farm and my family's legacy. Frustration quickly turned to action. I spent the next several days reviewing every correspondence from the HOA, gathering digital evidence of past fines, and compiling a dossier of my farm's operational history. I reached out to neighbors who had witnessed my daily routines and even recorded video testimonials of the practical benefits my tractor provided, not just to me, but to the local community, as I often lent a hand during harvests and emergency snow clearing. Every piece of evidence reinforced my belief that my tractor was not just a piece of machinery. It was a symbol of hard work and self-reliance. But as if the insult of the ban wasn't enough, nature decided to add insult to injury. Just days after the fine was issued, dark clouds gathered ominously over Silver Crest Estates. What began as a light dusting of snow quickly escalated into a full-blown blizzard. The storm was relentless, burying driveways, blocking roads, and plunging the community into chaos. Neighbors, who once prided themselves on their perfectly maintained lawns and immaculate appearances, found themselves stranded and desperate for help. It wasn't long before the unthinkable happened. The very people who had supported Karen's draconian measures started knocking on my door, pleading for assistance. Their cars were stuck in deep drifts, and the normally orderly streets were a mess of overturned vehicles and stranded residents. In a twist of fate, the fine that had been meant to punish me for my individuality now turned into a lifeline for a community in crisis. As I listened to the frantic calls for help, a bitter irony settled in. The same enforcers of conformity were now at the mercy of a winter storm they couldn't control. My tractor, banned and relegated to the sidelines, was the only hope for clearing the roads and restoring order. I realized that if I could get my tractor back in action, I could not only rescue my neighbors, but also prove, once and for all, that the HOA's rigid rules were nothing more than a tool for suppression, not a means to ensure safety. Determined to turn the tables, I began planning my counteroffensive. I decided that if I was going to reclaim my tractor or my livelihood, I would have to challenge the HOA on their own terms. I started by filing an official appeal against the fine, backed by all the evidence I'd gathered, arguing that my tractor was a vital asset for community support during emergencies. I also took to the local community forum, posting detailed videos and photos that documented the practical uses of my tractor, from plowing snow to clearing roads after storms. The digital response was overwhelming. Neighbors who had long been silent began to share their own frustrations about the HOA's arbitrary rules. Hashtags like hashtag Tractor Freedom and hashtag No More Infably started trending locally, and the once divided community began to rally around my cause. I even received messages from residents in neighboring towns expressing their support and admiration for my stand against the overreaching HOA. Meanwhile, Karen Thompson doubled down on her rhetoric, insisting that her decision was for the greater good of Silver Crest Estates. She held impromptu meetings with other HOA enforcers and continued to publicize her fines as a means of preserving community aesthetics. But every time she spoke, the evidence of the storm's havoc and the desperate pleas of stranded neighbors served as a stark reminder of the real priorities in our community: safety, practicality, and the need to support one another. In the midst of this escalating conflict, I decided that it was time to take further action. I mobilized my crew and prepared to clear the main road leading into my property, determined to prove that my tractor was not only legally mine, but also essential for the welfare of the community. The snow was knee-deep, and the wind howled like an angry beast, but with the support of a handful of brave neighbors, I set my plan into motion. Every shovel of snow, every rev of my engine, was a step towards reclaiming not just my tractor, but the right to operate freely on my own land. The situation was now a full-blown crisis. My appeal against the fine was in process. Digital evidence of my contributions during the storm was circulating widely, and the community was united in demanding that the HOA board reconsider its punitive measures. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown, a moment when the true value of individual rights and practical solutions will be put to the test against the arbitrary enforcement of outdated rules. As the blizzard raged on, the narrative in Silver Crest Estates underwent a dramatic transformation. Social media lit up with live streams and video clips of the storm's destruction. Cars buried in snow, neighbors struggling to free themselves, and a palpable sense of desperation replacing the usual quiet conformity. The hashtag Tractor Freedom quickly emerged, rallying residents around the idea that my tractor, banned by the HOA, was now their only hope for survival. Local news outlets were quick to capture the unfolding chaos. Reporters arrived on the scene, interviewing stranded residents and documenting the rampant snowfall that rendered the once pristine streets unrecognizable. It's as if nature itself is punishing the conformity imposed by the HOA, one reporter observed on live television. The visual of my tractor, barely visible under layers of snow as I struggled to clear the main road, became an iconic image that encapsulated the conflict between individual innovation and oppressive regulation. Within the HOA board, tensions escalated to unprecedented levels. Emergency meetings were held behind closed doors, and heated debates raged over the legitimacy of the fine and the broader implications of banning essential equipment. Leaked minutes from these meetings revealed a growing rift. Some board members acknowledged that the HOA's actions had gone too far, while others clung stubbornly to the rigid rules that had long defined Silver Crest Estates. Our community is in crisis, and we must prioritize safety and common sense over petty fines, one board member was quoted as saying. The internal strife was further compounded by public outcry, as residents demanded accountability for decisions that now endangered their safety during the storm. I continued to document every development. My live updates on community forums and social media were filled with raw footage of snowdrifts swallowing driveways, testimonies from neighbors whose lives have been disrupted, and detailed explanations of how my tractor was the only tool capable of clearing the roads. Digital petitions calling for the rescission of the $50,000 fine and the restoration of my right to use my tractor gathered thousands of signatures within hours. The collective voice of the community, amplified by countless shared posts and comments, made it clear that our priorities had shifted. Safety and practicality now trumped the superficial concerns of aesthetic conformity. Karen Thompson, the once feared enforcer of HOA rules, found herself increasingly isolated. Her attempts to justify the ban through press releases and social media posts fell on deaf ears. Every video clip, every live stream, and every heartfelt testimonial from a stranded neighbor only served to highlight the absurdity of the fine. Karen's narrative of protecting community standards was being relentlessly dismantled by the harsh reality of the storm. A reality where every minute without power or accessible roads was a minute too long for those in need. As the days wore on, the urgency of the situation grew. Neighbors, emboldened by their shared frustration and the undeniable proof of the storm's impact, organized impromptu meetings outside the HOA office. They demanded that the board reverse the ban and reassess their priorities. Local influencers and community leaders took to the airwaves, calling for a more rational approach to governance, one that recognized the fundamental rights of property owners and the practical needs of a community facing a natural disaster. My own efforts to clear the roads and bring my tractor back into service became a rallying point. Every shoveled mound of snow, every rev of the engine was documented and shared widely. I broadcast live videos showing my progress, the determination etched on my face, and the palpable relief as the first cleared path emerged from the snow. My actions were not just about reclaiming my tractor. They were about proving that individual innovation and self-reliance could overcome even the most oppressive of regulations. The digital dossier I had assembled, the security footage of the ban, the detailed logs of the storm's devastation, and the countless supportive messages from residents, was now a powerful tool in our collective fight. It served as irrefutable evidence that the HOA's arbitrary fine had not only endangered a livelihood, but had also hindered the community's ability to respond to an emergency. The mounting digital evidence, coupled with the undeniable suffering caused by the storm, left the HOA board with little choice. They had to act. By the time the final public hearing was announced, the digital momentum had reached its peak. Every shared video clip, every hashtag, and every testimonial underscored one simple truth. When a community unites, even the most draconian rules can be overturned. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would force the HOA board to either uphold their outdated policies or embrace a new era of practical, people-first governance. The decisive moment arrived on a crisp, clear morning in a packed boardroom at the Cedar Ridge Community Center. The room was filled with a diverse mix of HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and hundreds of determined residents, all gathered to witness the final public hearing that would decide the fate of our community's enforcement policies. With unwavering resolve, Councilwoman Rebecca Adams stepped up to the podium, her eyes reflecting the shared determination of a community that had long been silenced. After a comprehensive review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped security footage, detailed irrigation and power logs, and heartfelt testimonies from our residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Adams began, her voice resonant and authoritative. It is abundantly clear that the decision to ban my tractor from operating on my own farm was not based on any legitimate concern for community aesthetics or safety, but rather was driven by personal bias and an abuse of power by the HOA. Our community's rights as property owners must be upheld, and no one should have the power to enforce arbitrary rules that endanger our livelihood. A heavy silence fell over the room as Adams continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all fines and sanctions imposed as a result of this unjust ban. Furthermore, we will initiate a full disciplinary review of the policies and practices that allowed such overreach to occur, and we will implement new guidelines to protect the rights of every resident to operate their property as they see fit. Today's decision is not merely about reversing a fine. It is a resounding declaration that our community will stand for fairness, accountability, and the right to live and work without unwarranted interference. Her words struck a chord, and murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. At that moment, a longtime community advocate, a respected voice in Cedar Ridge, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united," he declared, his voice strong and impassioned. "No resident should be forced to bear the brunt of arbitrary rule enforcement. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear signal that Cedar Ridge values innovation, independence, and the sanctity of private property above all else. We demand accountability, and we will not rest until every violation of our rights is met with swift, decisive action." His declaration was met with thunderous applause, uniting the room in a resolute call for reform. Following his powerful address, a senior officer from the local public safety department presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert testimonies, and official reports that confirmed the legitimacy of my farm operations and debunked every claim made by the HOA. The evidence was irrefutable. The ban on my tractor was a clear violation of my property rights and a misguided effort to enforce conformity. The Internal Affairs panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against those responsible for the ban, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman Adams concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Cedar Ridge, a community where every resident's rights are respected and where public authority is exercised with integrity and transparency." Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will protect our freedoms and that no one can impose their will on our community without accountability. Together, we stand for justice, and we will ensure that the right to operate our property remains inviolable. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our battle for property rights and practical freedom. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Cedar Ridge. The days of arbitrary fines and personal vendettas were over, and a future built on respect for individual rights and practical innovation was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Cedar Ridge underwent a profound transformation. News of the rescinded fines and sweeping reforms implemented by the HOA board spread rapidly through local media and on social networks, igniting passionate debates about property rights, community governance, and the importance of innovation. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Cedar Ridge" and "Community United for Freedom," celebrated the decisive actions taken to protect every resident's right to operate their property without fear of arbitrary interference. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreCavaliing, and #InnovateFreely trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand up against oppressive rules. Town hall meetings and community forums saw record attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and envision a future where individual creativity and practical solutions were not only tolerated but celebrated. Neighbors, who had long felt stifled by the HOA's draconian measures, now spoke proudly about their right to manage their own land as they saw fit. "Our farms, our homes, they're our sanctuaries, and we must protect them at all costs," one impassioned resident declared, his voice resonating through a packed meeting. The atmosphere was charged with hope, a promise that Cedar Ridge would always honor the spirit of innovation and independence. Within the reformed HOA board and local public safety departments, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs emphasizing ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary processes were established to ensure that every complaint would be scrutinized fairly and that no resident would ever again suffer from arbitrary fines or invasive interference. Our duty is to protect the rights and dignity of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed in a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our renewed commitment to justice and integrity. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations mobilized further to empower residents. Workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns were organized to raise awareness about property rights and the importance of innovation in building resilient communities. When we come together, our voices have the power to reshape our future. A local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to unite and demand fair governance. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was deeply personal and transformative. My decision to fight back against an unjust tractor ban when I was stripped of my right to work my land had sparked a movement that resonated throughout Cedar Ridge. Neighbors who had long endured the consequences of arbitrary rule enforcement now found their voices and shared their own stories of resistance. The digital evidence that exposed the absurdity of the ban became a rallying cry for every resident who believed that property rights and the freedom to innovate were inalienable. Karen Thompson, once the unchallenged enforcer of the HOA's draconian rules, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one is above accountability when the community unites for justice. Her influence dwindled rapidly as digital records of her past transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the need for reform and the perils of unchecked authority. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Cedar Ridge, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the golden glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading "Unity, Freedom, and Innovation" was unfurled between towering oaks, and heartfelt speeches resonated with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate our victory over arbitrary rule enforcement, a victory for every homeowner and every creative spirit in our community, Councilwoman Adams proclaimed, her voice strong and inspiring. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protecting our freedoms and ensuring that innovation remains a cherished value in Cedar Ridge. As each new day dawned over our transformed neighborhood, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of progress. The story of how my HOA banned my tractor, only for a brutal snowstorm to force the very enforcers to seek my help, became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of property rights and the power of innovation. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Cedar Ridge, truth, justice, and practical freedom would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Cedar Ridge would forever be a place where creativity, integrity, and respect for individual property shone as brightly as the winter sun on fresh snow.